Hello everybody, here we are today doing a beginner's guide for the 2024-25 NHL season, trying to help people that might be newer to the NHL that want to learn a little bit more as the regular season approaches us. So before we get started with that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So if you're clicking on this video and you're trying to learn more about the NHL, I say welcome. I'm just a guy that really likes hockey, likes talking about the NHL in particular. So I wanted to help you out if you're trying to learn more about how the season kind of operates and just some things to know from last season that could help you at the start of this year. So let's kick it off with the fact that the regular season is a long one as it stretches 82 games for every single team. And of course, too, we have to talk about the fact there are 32 teams that are broken down into two conferences. You have the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. And then, of course, each conference is broken down into 16 teams. And you have two divisions per conference. So in the Eastern Conference, you'll have the Atlantic Division and the Metropolitan Division. Typically, it's called the Metro. It's a little bit shorter of a name, just easier to say. As for the Western Conference, you have the Central Division, and then you have the Pacific Division. Every single division will have 8 teams. Just a little bit easier. It's just more geography based. They're a little bit closer. They'll play each other a little bit more, leading to maybe a little bit better rivalries, if you will. Toronto and Boston being in the same division in the Atlantic, with them being original 6 teams, is really cool to see them get to play each other, like 4 times a year. But that's kind of one of the cool things as well with how the NHL operates. Every single team will see every other team multiple times throughout the year, and I really do like how that's set up. So a very, very long season, but everybody gets to see everybody for better or worse. So if you're a fan of one team, and maybe you're in a different city, you might get a chance to see that team travel over to this city. So that's very cool. As for some things to know from last season, the San Jose Sharks were the worst team in the NHL last year. They are a side that's been rebuilding for a minute, and they are kind of in a spot now where the rebuild's not done, but they are seeing a lot of these high-end picks that they've drafted in the NHL draft go on to probably have NHL debuts this year and have multiple guys that could win Rookie of the Year. It's kind of another thing that's important to note about the awards for the NHL. A lot of these are named after people that played in the NHL or had an impact on the NHL long before we were even existing, and that is something where it's not like Rookie of the Year, it's called the Calder Trophy. So Calder Trophy is one of those names. Goal of the Year is going to be called the Vezina Trophy. Those are kind of those things that are a little bit weird, and I would advise you, if you are learning about the NHL, to actually go and look at those awards and see where those awards came from, who were they named after, and exactly what impact they had. It's one of those deals where it has kind of a special tie to the sport and makes you understand again how old the sport is and how long the league's been around. Now, as for team play, again, we could talk about the team that won the President's Trophy, or the team that had the best regular season. That was the New York Rangers. They ended up having 114 points on the year, obviously made the playoffs as the best regular season team. However, they would not go on to win the championship, aka the Stanley Cup, and that's something that may seem a little bit odd for new fans, and that's the fact that teams that win the President's Trophy don't typically go on to win the Stanley Cup, especially over the past 10 years. We haven't seen a team go on to win the Stanley Cup after winning the President's Trophy since 2013. So we always joke about how there is the President's Trophy curse, because those teams that are the top sides in the NHL during the playoffs always seem to kind of find a way to lose. And it's not always that surprising to see them lose early, which is a little bit weird because of how long the regular season is. Why in the world are these teams that are so good falling early in the playoffs? Just one of those fun things to know if you're new to the NHL. Now we get to talk about the playoffs, which is kind of interesting. As you'll see, 16 teams make it, so basically half of the league, and the top 3 teams in every single division, so of course 12 teams, are able to go out there and make it to the postseason as a lock, and then you have the better teams remaining out of all that make it as a wildcard team. So you have 4 wildcard spots, so 2 per conference, set it up, and they have a little bit of a harder path to the postseason, and eventually things get whittled down where you go from the first round to the second round to the conference finals, to the Stanley Cup Final, which is hockey's grandest stage, which of course allows us to kind of talk about last year, where we saw the Florida Panthers go on to win the Stanley Cup, which was their first ever in franchise history. So you have the most recent champions. So if anybody asks who won the Stanley Cup last year, aka the NHL Championship, you can say the Florida Panthers. The team they beat along the way were the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games in the playoffs. It was a heartbreaking loss for the Oilers as they tried to come back from a 3-0 series deficit, and they were not able to do so, but they were on the verge of winning their first championship since 1990. All for Florida to be kind of pesky there. But of course, too, during the playoffs, every single series has the potential to go to 7 games. Whoever wins 4 games first in the series is how they go on to win it. And Florida won 4 games first, of course, as they took it the full distance in 7 games. That's the farthest you can go. And boy, was it ever a great season. But those are just kind of some quick talking points for the regular season. And so for a quick rundown, you have 82 games for every team, 32 teams. You have 2 conferences that comprise of 16 teams per conference. You have 2 divisions per conference that have 8 teams. You have the best team in the league called the President Trophy winners that don't always go on to win the Stanley Cup. You have some teams that are bad like San Jose, Chicago, and whatnot. You have some teams that are good like New York, like Florida, who would go on to win the championship. You have the Stanley Cup losers and the Edmonton Oilers. And then, of course, talking about the NHL awards like we talked about, a lot of legacy is attached to those, if you will. Some of these awards having their names going back over 100 years. The NHL is very rich in history, and I hope that you kind of get involved in this. And it's a sport that I'm very passionate about. It's a league I'm very passionate about. I hope that maybe you're able to say, I am able to be a fan at the start of this year, and maybe you can see your team go on to win the Stanley Cup in your first season. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick beginner's guide for the NHL to kick off the year. So with that being said, everybody please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe, have a great night, and Eagle of Hockey, alright. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.